Hello, today is Monday, April 7th. Welcome to episode 436 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Advisory Board member Lester Munson. I'm joined today by NSI Deputy Executive Director Martha Miller and NSI Fellow Jessica Jones. Folks, we're going to talk about the big news item today, which is the massive tariff plan the Trump administration announced last week. Those tariffs were imposed just recently on just about every country in the world, plus some other places that actually aren't countries and don't actually have people living in them, just penguins. So this is a massive pivot economically for the United States. No doubt this is something that irritates a lot of our friends and neighbors as well as our adversaries. We are, of course, the National Security Institute. We talk about national security. We talk about foreign policy. We're not an economics podcast. So while I think the economic theory and practice behind tariffs are abysmal, that's not our point today. We want to kind of talk about how this will impact the U.S. relationships with friends and allies. What does it mean for our national security in the long run? There's a whole bunch of things to unpack here. There's politics between the administration and Congress, the president's use of the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, or IEPA, to impose these tariffs, an effort in Congress perhaps to pull some of that power back. There is recent comments from Elon Musk, who says we should be moving towards a zero tariff policy with the EU. But also cabinet secretaries on the Sunday shows yesterday advocating for the plan and talking about how very serious the president is about this. And of course, we've got Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu going in to meet with President Trump today in the Oval Office. I think the first foreign leader to actually meet with the president to talk about a whole host of issues in Gaza, but also the fact that the Trump administration just imposed tariffs of, I believe it's 17 or 18% on Israel, even though we have a free trade agreement with them. Jones, what are your thoughts here about this rather amazing conundrum we find ourselves in? By the way, the big news for those of us who are of a certain age is that the markets have cratered over the last couple of days, and we have lost trillions of dollars in equity across the board. Another seemingly significant thing, of course, markets go down, they go up. There may be some volatility there, but it doesn't seem great. Jones, please share your views.
From that intro, I feel like I need more coffee to even begin to catch up with what is going on in the world, to be quite honest. It's quite a Monday. The tariffs that came out last week are kind of like all things President Trump related even to national security, right? It's blunt, disruptive, it's personal, right? It's nothing he does is light touch. And so it is, America first in action, right? It's his approach to bringing, U.S. leadership, sovereignty. It's how he sees the world, and there's not much thought to or care to what happens to allies or partners, right? You've mentioned, tariffs across the board, basically on every country. We don't need to get into the way they might have been calculated, which to some is questionable. The EU has already talked about retaliatory tariffs. We are talking about partnerships we've been trying to build. You brought up manufacturing in Vietnam. We've spent time trying to build up, manufacturing outside of China, but Vietnam was hit with tariffs like the same, right? And they're trying to see what they can do there. It's, the return of the industrial policy, a topic that's come up more frequently in the last couple of administrations, right? How do we bring back our defense industrial base? How do we bring back critical industries to the U.S.? And this is, a broad attempt to do that. I think what's difficult is trying to measure what does success look like what does bringing back manufacturing look like? How many jobs is that? What industries are that? Right now, we're kind of all sitting and waiting and thinking about that as the markets predictably tumble. China announced tariffs of 34% on Friday. There was questions whether, like a lot of other countries, China would come to the negotiation table with President Trump to try to dissuade the U.S. tariffs. But now I'm just wondering whether there is even a negotiating table. What does escalatory tariffs look like between the two biggest economies in the world? Are we moving forward with decoupling? Is that the natural, result of increasing tariffs between China and the U.S. You've mentioned Congress is starting to get a little worried. There are some close district elections, and that we've discussed a little bit in the last couple of weeks. Midterms are a little bit out, but you see Republicans starting to worry if a recession happens, that there might be a little bit of a bloodbath in the water coming up. And so I think Martha will talk a little bit more about what Congress might do to try to dampen, the executive's ability to continue to wage kind of trade wars.
Well, Martha, why don't you just pick it right up that Jones has handed you the baton quite well, I think.
Yeah. So look, this is actually the first time, as I've mentioned before on this podcast, this is actually the one issue that has genuinely sparked, I would say, not just kind of upset in the Republican ranks, but the willingness to actually say it out loud and go public that they disagree with the president. We know, like, behind the scenes, there are plenty of Republicans who disagree with President Trump, but they won't say it in public. This is one where they not only have said it in public, but they have introduced measures in Congress. This is not surprisingly, to some extent, spearheaded by Rand Paul, the Libertarian in chief in the Senate. But I think the thing is we're going to have to see an even bigger economic bloodbath for anything that could be enacted in Congress to survive a veto. So I don't really see Congress regaining its constitutional authority on tariffs, but this could go to court, and that could be very interesting. There are a lot of conservative legal scholars out there who have actually been sounding the alarm and calling this unconstitutional. Putting that aside, I guess I question the degree to which this actually supports our national security strategy. Our defense industrial base still relies on foreign supply chains, so this could actually slow down, DoD projects. In addition, if we're asking the Europeans to step up on defense, how does it help us then to create circumstances under which their economies suffer and they then therefore cannot spend on defense? That doesn't really sound logical to me. The other thing is, imposing punitive tariffs on Japan and South Korea. How does that fit our China strategy? I would like someone to explain what the strategy is on the national security front with these tariffs, because right now it does not make any sense.
Yeah, I have to agree. I'm very concerned that we're really giving a huge advantage to China in all of this by imposing massive tariffs on Japan and Vietnam and South Korea. We're just helping the countries that are with us against China's kind of neo-imperialistic impulses. And in fact, I believe both South Korea and Japan are engaged in conversations directly with China about how to respond to U.S. tariffs. What the effect of this is going to be to kind of reorder things against the United States, right? Economically, it can't really work. Other countries will trade with each other because they can't trade with the United States. They're going to strengthen those relationships. They're going to strengthen those alliances. We're going to be left out in the cold. And that has not been the way that we've had success over the last couple of generations of dealing with the rest of humanity. The great appeal of the United States is that we can work with other countries, and we almost don't even need to do too much to do it. People want to ally themselves with freedom and free commerce and that kind of thing, and we're really flipping a switch here that could turn all of that off. So there could be really deep implications for the way we're approaching the rest of the world, unless our hero Elon Musk is able to persuade the president to move towards zero tariffs with different entities, including the EU and hopefully Japan and South Korea as well.
Which cabinet member was like, "Oh, he's good at Doge, but he needs to stay in his lane." I think he got.
I'm forgetting exactly which one said that, but
there are some Trump supporters out there in the financial world who have been sounding the alarm. I think one even referred to it as an economic kind of winter, self-imposed economic winter or fallout. So
economic Waterloo. Yes. Okay, that's a wrap. Thanks so much to Kelly Crowley, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for their help in producing today's episode. Join us again on Wednesday, April 9th for another episode of Fault Lines, National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debate shaking up America. Fault Lines is now on YouTube. Check out our channel for a video of today's episode. If you like what you heard or saw, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.